So, Abe, you had trouble, right? Did you have any trouble getting out after the snow?
It took me 2 days to get out.
2 days to get out, okay. Now, you're in the city, though.
Yes.
Now, to be fair, let's face it, Abe, you've been in the city your whole life for the most part, right?
More or less.
Okay, so we all know that historically, due to the nature of the city, and I'm not just talking about the Philadelphia Public Works Department, just the nature of the city, narrow streets, everyone's crammed in, we know it takes a very long time for some roads, some streets to get cleared in the city. This is just the way it is. You knew that going in, and you've known that for years. Out here, very different story. Would you agree? I mean, very different story.
Historically.
Out here, historically, in the suburbs, out here, we don't expect it to take more than a day or two, even after a really big snowfall. We don't expect it to take more than a day or two, perhaps 3, if it's a very big snowfall, for people to at least be able to get out of their homes. That's one of the reasons people live out here in the suburbs. You don't have as many parking problems. You don't have these instances where people are held hostage in their home to snow, fighting over spots, putting chairs in parking spots because they spent all day. Did you do that, Abe? Did you?
That's illegal in Philadelphia.
That's why I was hearing that now they're cracking down on people who put the chair in the spot. So, but these are things that we never really had to worry about in the suburbs, and specifically in Upper Merion. Now, let me tell you something. 23 years ago, almost to the day, 23 years ago, this township had a very large snowfall. The whole Delaware Valley had. We've had several in the ensuing years, but specifically, 23 years ago, we had the 1993 storm of the century. Now, we had another storm of the century a few years later. But the 93 storm of the century, did you know what I did, Abe, during that snowfall? I lived in the Upper Merion Township building. Did you know that?
No.
I lived in the township building, and that whole storm, I stayed on live on the township channel, and I gave the up-to-the-minute road, the plowing conditions of every single road in Upper Merion Township. I don't care, these tiny little tertiary roads. I stood in front of a big map, I had a pointer, and I said, here you go, and this road is plowed, and this one's, there's salt on this road, and so forth. No internet back then, no Twitter, no Facebook, none of that stuff. Just a fool standing in front of a camera, just like now, only I'm sitting, and a map, and a telephone. Very similar to what we do here, actually, generally, right? A fool with a camera and a phone, right? Very dangerous, very dangerous. So, but I would give the road conditions, and people would call in and tell me how their street was and so forth. It was primitive, but it worked. Do you know, Abe, that all the technology that we have now, we've got Facebook and Twitter and Flipper and Pin this, and I mean all these things, people have cell phones, they can take video right on their cell phone. They can upload things. I mean, it's crazy technology. And yet the big complaint I was hearing about this storm was that there wasn't enough communication. Now, I don't know what really communication people wanted, but I do know this. Upper Merion, for years, was the crown jewel when it came to snow removal in the Delaware Valley. If you ever had any doubt as to where the township line was, say you're driving on a street and you know you're about to leave or enter Upper Merion, if you had any doubt as to where that line was, all you needed to do was drive during a snow, or right after, in the aftermath of a snowstorm, because you would see immediately where the road suddenly got terrible, you knew you were out of Upper Merion, or vice versa. When the road suddenly got great, you know, thank goodness you have entered Upper Merion. Our Public Works Department, second to none. And all of the previous incarnations of this show, I always gave props because the Public Works Department in this township was phenomenal. And I'm going to tell you this, it still is, because, and I don't know the intricacies of what has gone on or what has happened. It's my understanding budgets were cut and so forth. I don't know. I'll find out. But this was not an example of stellar snow removal. And you know, I see some of the folks on the Facebook who are apologists for the township. They've been saying, you don't understand. This was a historic snowfall. 24, 27, 32, 150 inches of snow. You can't move 200 inches of snow. in just a few days. Wasn't the case, and let me tell you something. Folks are acting like this is the first big snowfall we've ever gotten here in town. Abe, you know that's not the case, right? We've had many big snowfalls over the years. I'm not even that old. I remember many big snowfalls, like in '93, when just like this, it snowed the entire weekend. And yet still, roads were, they weren't great, but roads were passable. Many roads were not passable this time. And I got reports, direct reports from people right in the township. As late as Sunday night, they said plows hadn't even touched their road. Rebel Road, did you? Rebel Road in Brandywine Village. It looked as though it hadn't even been touched. And there were many roads like that. So I don't know if this was a case of snow removal budgeting or whatnot, but I will tell you this. I was off the record warned, not me personally, but just as a resident, warned by people in the know that this winter was going to be a doozy in Upper Merion because of cuts to snow removal, budgetary cuts. Now, how true that is, I don't know. Maybe a responsible host wouldn't open his mouth without that information. But I've never let that stop me before, right?